All right, I think we're going to get started here. So first off, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar and say thanks for joining. We at HiMonkey are excited to share with you the new Kentico user group site built with Kentico Cloud. We feel positively that with this new format, the Kentico user group community can continue to grow not only in numbers, but in quality content as well. The new site will help bring together all Kentico user groups from around the globe, as well as those wanting to learn more about Kentico, regardless of where they are located. That said, I'm going to turn it over to Virgil Carroll. He's a human solutions architect at HiMonkey and founder, to give you a little bit more background of the new site, how it was built, and where we're headed with the new Kentico user group. Virgil?
Thank you, Brian. Hi, everybody. This is Virgil Carroll. Like Brian said, I am the owner and principal human solutions architect at HiMonkey. Before I start sharing my screen, I just want to let everybody know that this will not be a technical deep dive into this topic. So hopefully you're here to kind of understand a little bit more about the business case and some of the content strategy that went behind this site and moving it into Kentico Cloud. So as we go through here, if anybody has any questions, there's a question and answer area. If you could please just ask your question there. One of our panelists will make sure that we see that and move forward from there. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And so welcome to the new Kentico User Group website. Kentico User Group, we've had this URL for quite some time, but overall, the site in its current inception has now been launched for approximately 1 week. So it's relatively new with a lot of new content. Overall, the effort of the Kentico User Group is really to try and connect partners and community members throughout the world into a community that is based on community members, and that is Kentico itself as a platform has grown over time. We saw a need to have more localized community user groups in that, and we actually have many throughout the world as of today. So the first thing before I actually start walking in, I did just want to mention, if you've never been on the site before, please make sure and go visit, and you can actually see all the different user groups that are currently active and some that are actually starting up right now from that. And if you're interested in getting involved with that, one of those, you can actually go to their page and you can actually learn a little bit about the user groups themselves. So I want to go through kind of a three-step process here and just kind of give you a little introduction to the site and then kind of walk through how it's built. So the Kentico user group site is basically broken into really 4 main areas on that. Access to user groups, upcoming events that we have throughout the user groups, but also being provided by Kentico throughout the community. Previous events, many of the previous events have slide decks and videos associated with them, and then also access to community resources out there. So I want to walk through the site just for a couple of minutes, just so that you kind of understand a little bit more about kind of how the site operates itself, because when we go into actual Kentico Cloud and how we actually built the site, that's going to kind of help make a little bit more sense. So first and foremost, one of the most important pieces of the Kentico user group is actually website is the user groups themselves. And so you can see that we have several of them. We actually have them broke down kind of by region. We have many that are starting up in North America or have been running in North America for some time. We have one very big user group in the Netherlands, in Europe, and then we have some starting up over in Australia in that area as well. But part of this is to give kind of a location where people could actually go in and access information about that. So I'm going to go ahead and click into the Minnesota user group. And as we kind of visit this page, you can see that right now we have no upcoming events because our event now is previous as of 9 minutes ago. So you can see that we have a previous event, but we don't actually have another one scheduled. But you can understand who's sponsoring this one, where it meets, how it kind of goes through, and then you can access actually the events that are kind of most relevant to them at the moment. So their next upcoming events, their previous one event that they've done in that, and also understand the sponsors as well. In the upcoming event area, you can actually go in and you can actually see upcoming events. So you see that there are several upcoming events coming around, including the Kentico Partner Summit. Some of the different Kentico road shows. If you happen to be in one of these areas, these can be very useful to kind of learn where Kentico is going in that. And much like anything, you can click into any particular event, and some of them have the ability to register there depending on whether there's a registration link. And then there's a lot of information that kind of goes along with that around the different events. From the previous events, this gets extended just a little bit further, so it's basically the same type of format as the upcoming events, but if you actually get into one of the previous events, and I'm going to do one here that actually has a lot of information in here, the Kentico 10 overview and Kentico Cloud introduction, you can see that it actually kind of changes in format a little bit, including that you have the PDF versions of the downloads, so the actual slide deck. And then actually many of them have YouTube videos associated with them where you can actually watch the presentation itself. So our hope is overall that this will kind of help grow the community and really kind of help people be able to get access to content out there that even if you can't attend a local user group, you might be able to go. And then the third thing there is our community resources. So we have many blogs that different Kentico MVPs and other people and organizations all host that has a lot of Kentico information on it. Community opportunities, including some of the different ways that you can connect with the Kentico community through Kentico, but through other channels as well, such as Stack Overflow. We have some just basic information about Kentico and Kentico Cloud as well. So we'll be continuing to kind of grow this as well. And the last piece I wanted to mention is the Contact Us form. And the reason the Contact Us form is actually this is part that integrates actually very well with Kentico Cloud. It's a very simple form that basically allows people to be able to quickly select the reason, give some contact information, and then if you're asking about a particular user group, we'll connect that with that user group. If you're asking about a particular topic ID, and that will pass that around to different groups to see if they're interested on that. But pay attention to this form because this is actually going to be very important. So now that I've given you kind of a brief walkthrough, you'll notice that this is not a seriously sophisticated site. There's not a lot of content. Well, there is quite a bit of content, but there isn't a lot of different things on the site. It's not a really large site, but it's very straightforward and clean, and that's one of the things that we like about using that. And so now enters in Kentico Cloud. So for those of you that are familiar, Kentico has been a CMS platform around for about the last 11 years, 12 years, and they have done a lot with their CMS. Cloud-based headless CMSs are kind of the newer thing now. It's definitely a buzzword that has become more popular, but really the concept of it really goes behind is saying, host your content one place and deliver it somewhere else. And so a lot of the premise around it is really having a repository of content where you can really do with more of what we call the COPE strategy, otherwise create once and present everywhere in that. And so really what that gives you a chance to do is have a single repository of content and really break content out in the truest sense, and that you're managing the content itself and then the interaction with the content, otherwise whether you're delivering it via a website, via some type of social channel such as Twitter or Facebook, or maybe you have an app, or maybe you have some type of internal system that you want to deploy some of this content. So you have a central repository that you're using to be able to basically deploy this content anywhere you want in a simple and very clean format using programmatic languages and different API calls and that kind of stuff. So that's probably about as technical as I'm going to go into that process. But from there, and we're actually going to walk through really extensively 2 out of the 3 products that come along as part of the Kentico Cloud headless CMS offering. The first is managed content, and and we'll be talking a lot about that and how we basically developed our schema or our structure to be able to manage the content, to be able to deliver on the website itself, some of the taxonomy that goes into that. The second one that we're going to talk more about is going to be personalized experience. So this is where we're able to track how visitors are doing things, better understand them, and do things with that. So we're going to kind of talk about that and how you can kind of integrate that into your overall kind of digital communication strategy, and basically be able to help that, use that to help you understand your audiences better and how to better target content to them over time. The third one, and I'm just going to touch on this one a little bit because this gets a little bit more into the technical details and more programmatic type of things, is how we display content. So otherwise, how that content is delivered outside of Kentico Cloud onto your website, your social channels, and that kind of stuff. But you're definitely more than welcome to read a lot more information about it by going to kenticocloud.com, and you can understand a lot more about that. From Kentico Cloud, when you actually log in, you are presented with a project that you're able to create, and you are immediately have access to all the different systems. So once you kind of have these projects, you actually have the ability to have multiple different types of projects. And that one of the nice things is people actually have the ability to share their projects with you. So if you're a partner, you would be able to get potentially access to somebody else's projects, so that you could actually have access in that. Starting up, you very easily give the project a name. I always recommend a meaningful name, and then you can start to add your users on here. The reason I wanted to bring you to this screen and kind of say, well, that's like any system, you can add users. One of the important things is how this is eventually going to extend to the community that we serve, and also the other community members that actually serve that community. And so one of our future state pieces of this, and one of our next steps in the evolution of this site, is actually to get people from Kentico, but also from the Kentico community members, access to be able to add content in there. So if I'm part of the Wisconsin or the SoCal user group, I don't have to give something to HiMonkey, and HiMonkey has to put it up, but I can actually go and put up and manage the page ourselves. Now, this isn't necessarily going to replace their own local user group sites. This is really about creating kind of this central location where people can come to kind of learn about the Kentico community and in general, and then be able to actually go out to their individual sites and kind of more interact locally with the user group. So this is not meant, but if there is a user group that is starting up that doesn't really have the capacity to start their own site and that kind of stuff, this could be a good alternative for them to be able to kind of do their things. And we kind of see building more mechanisms around that as the community continues to grow. So you're able to easily add people onto the project, and you'll see right here that you actually have 4 different promotion levels that you can give them in that. So a project manager, which is really a person that can do almost everything inside Kentico Cloud, developer that can do a little bit less but can do all the kind of developer-based things like access the API keys, delete content types, taxonomy groups, and those kind of things. Content contributors, which is really about working with content, which means you can publish content, view content, kind of manage that stuff. And then we also have a reviewer role here that can also be part of the equation, where if you just have somebody that through your content process, as you kind of work on content, you want somebody just to be able to come in and read, add comments, kind of make suggestions in that, but not really interact with the content itself. That can be a very valuable thing. And so if you are a large organization, or an organization kind of going through your content really creation and editing process, this can be very valuable in that you can get people to be able to access it at different touch points and kind of understand the whole process going through it and that. So once you have your content process created and your project created, you can then go into a lot of the different functionality and features in there. And so really the 2 we're going to focus on first is we're going to talk about kind of the content models and the inventory in that. But I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the inventory screen here. And so what basically this gives me is this gives me access to everything that we have currently developed inside of Kentico Cloud's delivery mechanism here, and it also gives me a quick access to what workflow step this is. So we're going to go back in a moment and kind of talk about workflows, but what workflow process it is, and then also where it's located, what type of content it is, and everything like that, and when it was published, if it has a due date attached to it where we had a certain thing that we were looking to be due in there. We actually have some test content in here so that we can actually keep some things in draft and review in that kind of stage. But then on the side, you can really see that you have a lot of sophistication around here to really kind of narrow down that content and kind of find that. So not only can you quickly look at something that's in a particular workflow step, but then you can actually take it to other things like what's its published state, what type of content is this, does it have a location on the site map that we've created for this, and then some of the taxonomy, actually some of the metadata that we've created for it. So we really have a lot of power to be able to quickly filter this list just by the kind of data that we put alongside of our content inside there. But on top of that, I could also very easily filter it here by typing in some type of word and filtering on the name or however I might be there. So there really is a lot of power there. So when you create a project, one of the first things you want to really understand, especially in your content creation process, is your workflow in that. And so your workflow can be very simple to very complex. And this is basically the steps that you want to do while going through the process. We deal with a lot of very large projects. And part of that is that we actually tend to have a lot of different things from the point of a lot of different steps. So you can consider like when you're going through your content creation process, okay, does it follow your style guidelines? Does it follow your formatting guidelines? When it actually moves into a web page, does it have all the correct tags associated with it? Do the images have it? If you're an organization that needs to worry about WCAG accessibility, have you passed all those tests and that kind of stuff? And so one of the things you can think about from there is kind of managing that from this process. So a very typical process is going to be somebody starts to write content. They submit it for some kind of review. The review is completed, it's ready for publish, and then it goes to publishing and that. So again, in this particular instance, we have a very simple one, but you could have multiple steps. We've done content creation processes where we've worked with clients where basically it's like somebody's writing or rewriting the content. It's being reviewed by somebody from that internal department that is over that content. They are making their content or their comments and giving their reviews and that. And then it goes to the next stage where maybe it's going to a higher level reviewer, such as somebody from the communications or marketing department. It could have a stage where there needs to be assets added, such as images and all that kind of stuff. And you could have all these different stages. And basically what this is really going to help you do is really understand where things are, assign people to manage those different components, and really kind of get some general structure around your process so that you're following a more disciplined process. Because anybody who's went through a large, especially migration process or content creation process knows that, especially when you're talking about from starting from the written word or video or audio content or whatever it is, getting that to the final production, there are many, many things that have to happen in between. And if you're doing that for a single piece of content, maybe that's not that difficult. But if you're talking about managing hundreds and thousands of pieces of content at the same time, where a system like this really gives you an advantage is that you can manage those process steps and really kind of keep control and understand where things are, identify bottlenecks in your system, really kind of understand how that can really be of benefit to your organization, and really kind of manage those processes much better. Excuse me. So once you have your workflow steps put in place, you actually can go to the next step, which you can kind of debate what you want to do first, but the first thing I'm going to go into is an assets library. And though you can kind of add assets as you go here, one of the things I like to do is you may be already starting out from a process, and I wanted to make sure. So you actually have a very easy way to be able to add assets onto your site, so you can easily grab into there. You can upload some type of image, just like here, it uploads just like any typical one here, and then you actually have the ability to be able to view it and create some kind of description. And this description will actually be used as alt text. So if you're looking at especially being accessibility compliant, which even if you're not required to be WCAG accessibility compliant, I can't tell you this is not such a huge extra step that can make a huge difference in somebody's life that is viewing via screen reader. Plus, for those of you that are definitely more marketing focused, this also makes a big impact on how search engines such as Google and that scores your site, whether how compliant you are with good structure, which good structure these days also makes you compliant with accessibility standards. So you could start adding assets and that kind of stuff that you can access then, or as you go through the content creation process, you can actually access those as well. So you have a lot of different things. But also just to note that this is not limited to just pictures and that kind of stuff and images, but you can actually see that we have PDFs loaded up here. You could add videos, so it really is truly an asset library. And one of the benefits for this is when information actually is pulled out of Kentico Cloud via the API calls and that kind of stuff, Kentico Cloud kind of acts as what we call a content delivery network, otherwise a CDN, and that basically, if you've never heard that phrase before, it actually everything is highly cached. It's optimized for speed. So unlike when you're pulling an image from a local file system or something where there might be some issues with how fast the image loads up, these systems are actually created to basically optimize delivery, so that if you're asking for this Kentico logo over and over and over and over again on every single page of your site, instead of constantly pulling that image and constantly taking up the bandwidth to do that, it'll cache it so it actually delivers that much faster. So you'll see a huge increase in performance as your site is used and those things come through on that side. But of course, the most important part of delivering content is there has to be content to deliver. So the first thing we have to really understand is we have to understand how to model this content. Going along with very standard terminology such as that, if you're familiar with the Kentico CMS itself, the server version of this is called page types. But in here, since we're dealing with more general content and not really in a CMS itself, it's called content types to kind of understand. So this is basically exactly what it sounds like. This is your different types of content and how you do something with them. So you can see that we actually have 4 different types of content that we've identified for this. Not a lot. In your site, it would probably have a lot more, but for this purpose, we only really have these main things. We have pages and their content, we have user groups and their content, we have community resources, and then we have community events. So I'm going to go into the community events one here just to kind of walk through in there. So you can see up front, right at the top, I actually get a friendly warning here to let me know that this is used with published content, which basically means that if I make any changes to this template on how content is, it's not going to actually be applied to those published content. I'll actually have to unpublish those pieces of content, add my new data or make my changes, and then actually republish that. And that's very important to note that, if you're in here working in the structure and you make a change while you already have content live, that's not going to affect that content until you actually unpublish and republish that content. And so what you see here is basically you think of this as really a form that people can fill out to really kind of understand and add their content. And so you can see right here we have an event name, we have a related user group, so otherwise what user group is maybe hosting this. We have an event registration link, so we have some text there, an event summary so that we're able to show that up on our home page here, kind of a summary, not showing the entire text of that right there. We have the location, the date and time. Post event, we'd have the video embed code, so otherwise where the video is located, so then it could be streamed by users. The same with downloads. Are we linking to an external resource? So otherwise maybe somebody's hosted this up on one of their own share platforms that they want you just to go to their Dropbox, or maybe it's one of the things like one of the presentation systems, or is it something that is actually hosted here inside of Kentico Cloud and that. And then another one that we actually thought was very important was to determine when we were going to publish these, because one thing we wanted to do from this is be able to give user groups and people a chance to be able to actually put things up in advance and work on them and not have to worry about, well, that all of a sudden is showing live. And they may be completely done, but they still don't want, and they have it published, but they don't want it to show until a particular date. So that's actually a very useful. And then do not archive. So really the reason behind this field right here was that there may be events that we really don't want people to access as previous events. It may be some type of one-off thing. Overall, this may never get used, but overall it's a good practice, especially if you're going to have a content strategy where you're going to have a lot of things about kind of deciding, well, do you want to keep this in the running total? So a good example of this would be like, let's say that you were using this system to publish news releases for your organization. You may have news releases that are kind of quick announcements or something like that, but you don't necessarily want it to be searchable over a long time. So you could basically kind of select this flag that, do not archive in that. So the great thing is it's actually very easy to be able to add fields in here. You can see that I have all these different options on this side here that I can actually go through here in that. And so I can quickly drag and drop, determine the location I'm going to do it. I give the label to that. And then I actually have some features here where I can actually do some different things. So if I wanted to be like, new label, and I'm of course going to get rid of this after in that, I can write some guidelines that says, please fill this out so people know about a new label and that. And then I can also determine whether this is required or optional, otherwise that the content contributor actually has to fill this out, so I could easily turn that to a required field in that. And then I actually have some limits on that around the words or characters, like I could limit it to a certain number of characters. So here would be a good example, as if like a good practice could be that not only are you creating an event summary, but you're also creating an event social post that you would also maybe pull from your social system and actually push up to Twitter or Instagram or something like that. And so you could actually not only limit words, but you could limit characters. I'm going to go ahead and remove that, but that kind of gives you an idea there. You can see that you have rich text, which is going to be more like a WYSIWYG editor. So you'll be able to use that to basically be able to create much richer text, embed images or files, create links and that kind of stuff. We'll look at that a little bit when we go to the content side of this. A number field, multiple choice, where you're basically able to see here. So you can see like here I'm using the multiple choice, and actually my multiple choices I'm using checkboxes, and I'm just using it very simple that don't show in past events. But I could have a multiple choice that's like yes, no. It could be multiple things that you want people to choose from that side in there. And then I have a date time field. So just like we're using that, you can very easily be able to add a date time in there. And then assets, so where you use the asset type field, this is going to be able to, you can either upload a file or you can select a file already in your assets library. And then the one that I kind of want to focus just a couple minutes on is this modular content. So part of what's actually very important from kind of a content mechanism strategy is we think of what we consider content models. Otherwise, one of the best thing is, again, kind of go into that COPE strategy of create once, publish everywhere. We really look at it that you can have these interrelationships. So this in particular is you can have an event may be sponsored by someone like Kentico, or it may be sponsored by a particular user group in that. And what we don't want to do is on every single event page add those companies or organizations in onto every page. Instead, we kind of have this user group content piece, and then we have this event content piece. And basically what this gives us a way is to tell that actually that these are related together. So you can see that I have some modular content here called related user group. Sorry, I keep rolling over the wrong thing. I can actually configure that, and I can actually not only limit the number of items that you could add, so maybe if you wanted to say this could only be limited to one related content item or multiples. So you could think of having like a particular page of content on your site, and then you want to show these news items on it or these products on it. You could do that, and basically you have your product content type where you have all your products, and you have this. But in this particular, you're also able to limit, so I've limited to just the user group content type from that side to kind of really understand what's happening here in that. So I realize that's a lot to go through. Obviously, you have your save mechanism here, but once we get to the content side, I think this is going to make a tad bit more sense from that side. So I'm going to close without saving because I'm not making any changes there. So once you kind of have your content types together, you can actually go ahead and actually start creating your own content inside here. And so from a content standpoint, I'm going to go ahead and click into one of these test events because we have a few of these test events that we have in a review stage. And you can see that now I'm actually working with a piece of content. So if you are a content contributor with just content contributor permissions, you would only have access to kind of the content tree and actually doing something with the content. The content type models and those kind of things are only available to people with higher level permissions. So they're not going to be able to go in here. But overall, you can see, okay, we've made up an event called the North Dakota CUG Meetup. You can see right here is that I actually have my related user groups. So I can actually add another piece of content here so you can see what happens here. So let's say that I wanted to look at all my user groups here that I wanted to be related to. And just for this, you can see that I have a North Dakota user group. So I'm actually going to select the North Dakota user group, and I'm going to hit assign. And you can see now that that actually shows up here. So now there's a relationship here with my event, with the user group. One of the great things is that you see that I also see the status of this. So actually, if I publish this event, but I don't publish the related user group, it's actually going to notify me that I need to do both. You can see kind of the standard text fields. You can see that I have the event detail here, and I can very much do header 1, header 2, header 3. You'll notice that I can't select styles and that kind of stuff. So this is kind of one of those important things to understand when you start talking about a pure content scenario where you're really just managing content, and that is that you really just want to use basic tags and basic structure, and then really when you actually deliver this on your website and your digital channel or that's where you want to control your styles and how this actually displays on a page. The good news is one of the things this really does is it makes you follow a much more disciplined format. So you can see that I can do a lot of the basics, including add a table, I can create links, I can insert images, but I can also add other content inside here. So if for some reason I wanted to display something else inside here, I actually could as well. The only other one I wanted to kind of mention is you can see my multiple choice here, and obviously I can easily pick an image from here and find it from my assets library and that kind of stuff. Once you kind of have your content complete, this actually auto saves, so you actually don't have a save button on here. So as you're kind of doing things, it saves periodically so that you never lose your work, which is really good. But when you over here in the detail panel, you can see that actually you can actually change the status, and not only change the status, but you can also, so if I said this was ready to publish now, I could actually go and say, okay, well, Miranda is the person responsible for this. Miranda make sure to read this over and let me know if it is good to go. So, and I also have the ability to give her a due date. So I'm going to say that she needs to do it tomorrow, and I'm going to just say tomorrow by 12 noon, just to make this simple. And that from there, and then I'm able to easily update the workflow. That's actually going to send Miranda a notification on there, and then you can actually see that I can see kind of right here the note that I gave her, who the current person assigned is, and that kind of stuff. But you can also notice that this is actually where you have a location and a sitemap in there. And so in this particular case, I actually do the sitemap just a tad bit different than what is on the site itself, and that's actually more from an administrative standpoint. I'm going to go briefly into the sitemap just so that you can see that. But overall, from an administrative standpoint, if you think about it, we want to kind of keep all the North American, European, and Asian Pacific events separated, not really from the standpoint of they shouldn't be able to do something, or people are, we're trying to provide security around it, but more so from the structure of, if I'm part of the Wisconsin group, I know kind of the area on the tree to go. And since this is all a content repository, and through the way I can deliver it everywhere, anywhere I want, I can actually then do other things to bring that to fruition and that. And so you can see here that I can actually place it in a location. I can see a new discussion around comments, plus around there. And I can actually see revisions. So this is another very handy thing, is that you can actually not only see revisions, but you can roll back to those revisions and actually see what people were doing at that point in time. So if I wanted to see what it looked like when it was in draft format, you can see it actually had nothing in there in that. And so I can easily kind of look through there and understand that from the content side. Once the content is ready to publish, I would just push it to the publish stage, and then that's going to actually make the piece live at that point in time. So kind of going along with this and kind of looking at the other pieces, I want to look at another component. I'm going to go ahead and go into a particular user group because I actually want to show this one here from the side. So another component that you have as part of this, and you probably saw it in the content model, is we have the ability to have a taxonomy. And so taxonomy being metadata that we can actually attach to things. So I want to just pull up this in particular so that you can see this. You can see that I have a taxonomy here of North America, Asia Pacific, and Europe, which coincides with actually how we break out these different areas in this, that this is a North America, Europe, or Asia Pacific type user group in that. And so up here, again, needing developer, project manager permissions, you have the ability to create taxonomies. And so taxonomies can really be as simple or as complex as you can make them. In this particular thing, we've made a pretty simple taxonomy for people to be able to do for regions. And then actually for our community resources, again, we've done one around blogs, communities, Kentico Cloud, external events. Again, you can kind of see that from the standpoint of this is actually how we're doing this. And so really what this is going to do is this is actually going to give you a lot of metadata to be able to utilize to kind of not only filter content, understand it, but also to be able to push along with your website, to be able to better categorize stuff, provide it to your search engine. I mean, there's just a lot of different things. And so it really is simple to do that. So I could just do, a new test category right here. And I can easily drag it up to where I want it to be. I can put it underneath something so you can have nested categories for your own thing and that, so you can see kind of how I can do that there and very easily then use it as there. So if you have an organizational taxonomy or maybe different keywords that you want to be able to share on a site, so one of the use cases you could do is if you have keywords and you want set keywords that are added to pages as part of whether whether you're doing things with just standard metadata for search engine optimization, or whether you're doing more advanced things such as Open Graph, or you're doing schema.org tags or whatever like that, you could actually use this to kind of standardize those so that people can select from a model of keywords that you want to be able to associate, and then actually pull those into the web page, which could be very valuable in that. And so you have no limit on the amount of taxonomy groups that you can create, and you can really add them and use them everywhere. Obviously, one of the other side benefits is when you're in the inventory, you can easily use those to additionally kind of break down. So if I wanted to know, and I wanted to only see user groups that were in Asia Pacific or user groups that were in North America, obviously I can very easily kind of break that structure down and utilize that from that side. So the last piece that I want to kind of go through here, just kind of from a high level overview, is your sitemap. Now, in a traditional sense, sitemaps would most likely really be utilized from the standpoint of actually being the structure of the site itself. I've actually done this a little different, but here's kind of where a sitemap can help you. So as you kind of build a structure for a website, you kind of understand the different pages and that kind of stuff. Again, looking at this as content, content is not always a page. Content could be different components that need to be stored in pages. So you could have a page where you have your news releases, and then you have maybe email lists you could subscribe to. You have maybe reports that you provide to your visitors and that kind of stuff. And this could be a news and media page. That news and media page is a page in and of itself, but the content underneath of it is a lot of different content components. So you may have a news and media page here where basically you would store all those different items underneath of it to give you some contextual help so that you kind of understand. So if you want somebody just to work in the news and media area, you can do that. And so again, just like with the taxonomy, you can very easily add something new. So I'm going to go new page, and again, you can kind of determine where this goes in here, and that, and there. And so once you kind of have that in there, then you're able to very easily, again, from the inventory, you're able to find and actually store things underneath of the different locations in the sitemap. And then as we went in here, you probably saw the same thing, that we could actually select. So this North Dakota user group here, I'm actually going to make sure is in the North American user groups in that. And so now that's saved. And you'll see very easily that if I come back here and go to North American user groups, you'll see that whoops, sorry, it was right here. We're at North Dakota user group is now in there in that. So you can use it for a lot of filtering and a lot of sorting functions, but more so from a structural, because again, on a simple site like this, I mean, we have about 100 pieces of content. So that is a decent amount, but not a large site. But if you're a site that has thousands upon thousands of pieces of content and you're using this to manage, the sitemap can really help you manage it from a structural basis, even if the way you deliver that content on your website and other things, it does not follow that structural pattern. This can be a great way. So in a lot of content management strategies, a lot of times you have what you consider like a global content repository, and then you really use either structure or you use metadata to kind of pull that and surface that information in an appropriate format. So now that I've kind of went through this side, and I've got about 12 minutes left, so I want to go to the other side, which is about, I said there were going to be 3 different pieces. So I'm going to real briefly kind of touch on the development component of this. Again, this is not a development talk, so I didn't want it to be here. But basically the way this kind of comes out is that when you actually set up the system, you have the ability to use what's called the delivery API. And the delivery API basically gives you an opportunity to be able to publish this content and pull it from other mechanisms. That could be a CMS you could use. It could be that your developer team has developed some custom code to be able to do this. It could be a lot of different ways that you're pulling this in and actually publishing this onto a website itself. So you're using these different components here. to be able to do that and use it. But the one thing I wanted to make sure to note right here is this tracking code, because this is actually going to become very important for the last piece that I want to share with you. So another component of Kentico Cloud is their Engage piece, which is really about kind of understanding your traffic and being able to do something with it from that side. And so to be able to enable that piece, you basically have to, much like you do with Google Analytics, you need to add this script up into the header section of your website. All it does is basically allows Kentico Cloud then to be able to track the traffic on your website. So very important that if you want to enable that component of it, the next components that I'm going to share with you, you actually have to go in and do that. So from a Kentico user group site, I do want to say that I'm going to first go to kind of our analytics here. Since this has only been up a week and we actually haven't done any promotion of the new site yet, we really don't have a lot of traffic on here yet, or at least a lot of different traffic in here. So but as we kind of grow the site and as we start to promote it more, we expect that traffic to increase, and this will be one of the ways to do it. But one of the concepts that you need to understand about this isn't just about tracking kind of web traffic itself, but kind of the type of traffic, where they come from, and then being able to do something with it. The overall goal of this system is really to say, okay, what we want to do is not only understand what people are doing on our sites, but also help kind of track those people more individually, and then on top of that, actually be able to use that tracking mechanism to be able to do something and actually engage with them on a more intimate, more personalized level. So what I've come to is the analytics tab here, and you can see that it's a very typical type of things that you see in a lot of different analytics systems. So we can kind of see our traffic pattern here for the last month, and really kind of see when we're getting visitors and that kind of stuff. So for us, this will be very beneficial as we kind of start rolling out new Kentico user group events, and we roll out our marketing events and that kind of stuff. We can kind of track to see what type of people are actually visiting the site and what they're doing. So you can see that we have some things like if they filled out a form. You remember I showed you that contact form. So we have that. Did they actually fill out a form? Where did they come from? As we start getting people to find us from Google and that kind of stuff, that'll start to populate from that side. What countries they do, obviously since it's only been a week, it's mostly just been up, and what type of pages they're visiting and that kind of stuff. So much like most analytical systems, it just gives us a very nice, very brief overview of the different components here that we go into it. But what really becomes powerful is when we start talking about the concept of contacts. And so contacts can actually be one of three types of things. There could be a contact that's actually more of an anonymous user, somebody that does it, but somebody who's actually interacted very significantly. But overall, the real power around this, and so I'm going to select on Miranda, who obviously was there, is that we don't only have this information, you can see that she submitted a form within the last month, so we can actually gauge the thing there. But then you'll see that actually once she's kind of started to interact with the system, we can actually start to understand a lot more deeper about Miranda. So where we're able to really capture this information so granular of Luke and Fred and Miranda is because they filled out a form on the site. The Kentico Engage platform actually captures the data from that form and actually allows us. So if I'm getting ahead of myself. If I was to go through there and actually look, I might be able to go back and actually see exactly what she did. And that's not where she filled out the form. Not there, not there. It must be here that she filled out the form. Okay, I need to find this on the 12th. Sorry, I probably should have prepped that one in advance. But now I can't find where she filled out her form in that. So I'm going to switch over to Luke Skywalker here just because I did this yesterday. So I'm going to show this. And there, you can actually see the first engagement that he had with us was filling out the contact form. You can actually see that I can see all the data that he had there. So all the different components that went along there from that. And then I can actually see the path that he went through there. And really one of the values of that is somebody like Miranda, that actually now that we understand who she is, we can actually kind of track her activity and actually what she's doing on each subsequent visit and where she's going, and have a better understanding with that. And then you can see over here that we can actually understand what platforms they're using. So much of this information is very similar to the information we're able to collect in a system such as Google Analytics, but to me it's actually being presented in a little bit more meaningful, and it's really around the person versus necessarily the overall statistic in that. And so where the statistic can be very valuable, what you really can do is you really can show a lot more about what they've done individually and how they've kind of used it in that. And you could use this down to an individual, so otherwise you could really kind of understand what this person is doing. So if this was a lead that was an active lead, you could actually go in and kind of understand what they're looking at before somebody actually contacts them. So if it was a contact lead that contacted you for a sale, you could kind of understand their pattern. You could see the projects they're looking at or the services they were looking at. You could really gain a lot of information from that that could really give you that competitive advantage. The other side is that and so the last mechanism is that they have this concept called segments. Otherwise, being able to segment out your traffic and actually understand what's happening. So when I think of segments, I really think of it as it could be a very useful thing from the standpoint of maybe you want to understand what people are doing, or just kind of group people by maybe the state they're coming from, whether they filled out a form or not, maybe if they fit some kind of other criteria that you have. But another one could be like, let's say that you're doing a marketing campaign from the beginning of May to the end of June, and you really want to track a segment that really helps you understand the people that visited the site. Where did they come from? Did they come from that link? What did they do when they came through? Because this really can start giving you a lot of insight into your marketing. So you can see, since we don't have a lot of data right now on here, I created a very simple segment, and this simple segment basically says that they have submitted a form on the page "Contact Us" in the last 4 weeks. And so right now I have it, but I can see the contacts in there. I can see how many people have been added in the last 30 days. I can see the size of the segment, and all the kind of stuff. So I'm going to just go real quickly here. And so you have two types of segments you can create. A static segment, so this could be like a good example, like let's say that again you did that campaign from May 1st to June 30th, and now you wanted to create a segment basically based on all the traffic and some specific criteria that was inside that marketing campaign. You could create that, and then actually just look at those people that actually came to the site then and do some analysis there. Or you could do a dynamic segment, such as maybe I want to always track people that, who's done it in the last month. I want to see how many people actually submitted forms, what they're doing. Maybe we're trying some different marketing adventures, and we just want to know how our is creating. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new segment here. And you can see you have a lot of different options here on their visitor profile, the things they do. If you understand the company they're coming from, the job title, the country, the region, the city, if you could do it as if somebody visited a particular page or maybe a particular section of their is this their first visit? Is this if they were first seen after, say, today, and that I want to do something with them? How many times have they visited? Is this their last visit? All these different real criteria allow us to kind of build that in there. And so what you can see, like right here, is if I go to like page visit, and I say like page, and I'm going to grab the community resources page right here, and that anytime, and I hit apply, you can see that it already automatically creates that all of the users there actually visited the community resource one. So now if I actually, let's say that I went to an upcoming event, and I'm just going to click on one that I know I probably haven't clicked on before, and is one of those, and I grab this page here, let's say that I also want to say, change this here. And now instead of the community resources page, and I'm going to change it to this one right here, and I'm going to hit apply. You can see that actually only one of our visitors have done that. So you can see that you can actually start to do this, and you don't only have to do one. You could also be like, this was their first visit, and their first visit was after June 1st, and that. So now we apply, and so it looks like 3. So this is at least one of the rules must be true, which basically means that this is an or statement. So either this or true, or this true, or I could do all, which recalculates it, which basically says that it has to meet all these criteria. So as you kind of build out your site, and as you kind of track your site further and that kind of stuff, this can be very valuable. So as I kind of wrap up here, and I realize I went through a lot, but I kind of really wanted to go through and make sure that you had a good understanding. This all really goes to the site and how it's built and kind of the structure behind it. I want to leave you with a few key points. You have these 3 pieces. You have your content creation piece, you have your delivery of content, and you really have your tracking of your visitors and the personalized experience that go along there. All 3 are part of the same package. When you purchase one, you're purchasing them all. But overall, one of the important things is you don't necessarily have to use all 3. You could use individual components. We've worked with a lot of with clients that have just used the kind of content creation component of it. On our own personal website at HiMonkey, we use the content tracking or the visitor tracking side of it. You can kind of mix and match and kind of do those pieces as you want. But overall, what it really gives you an opportunity to do is really kind of manage it to a really great extent and do some really cool things, yet also expand out of just thinking of a website as a website, but also how your content can be delivered to a lot of different channels. So some of the next steps we're going to be working on, again, is getting the user groups more involved around the world, and where they can add their own content. We're going to start doing more of a marketing campaign around kind of publishing the new site and kind of letting people know we're up there. One of the things I didn't really talk about that you actually have the ability programmatically to do inside of the engage component is actually create your own touch points. And so in a contact, you saw that you can actually see the different things that they did and what they saw. So now you could actually create your own custom one. So a couple that we're thinking about is like, does somebody click on a user group? We would know that, but does somebody click on a community resource because that's an external link? So we could actually track that activity, or does somebody watch a video on the site and we could track that activity as well? So that's pretty cool. We're going to be hopefully adding to community resources. So if anybody knows of any community resources that are missing currently on this page, let us know. And then eventually we want to go through and do a little bit more elaborate design refresh. Obviously, these are things that we do on the side. This is something that we do volunteer based. So sometimes the time and effort into a lot of things goes to just the time and effort that we have to be able to put into those things. So I want to thank everybody very much. I realize we're 1 minute over the actual webinar time. I see people are kind of already starting to drop off here. But if anybody has any questions before we get off, I'm more than happy to stay on for a few minutes and answer those questions.
I'm not seeing any as of yet, but like Virgil said, we'll just stick around here for about a minute or two to see if anyone has any questions and go from there.